So now we go back to the library because it's support group time again. And everybody is chattering about June's appearance. And when she walks in, they clap for her, but she brought a friend. And oh, what a friend to bring. First of all, this fucking lady waiting outside of her support group, like, seriously, fuck these people. Why? So my notes actually say, and this is before we even got to this part, I said, why is it they think they deserve forgiveness, that is a thing they can even ask for? So June was like in my head before I knew that she was in my head. Like, the audacity and total lack of boundaries on this woman, it's so similar to Serena. Like, they think that if they just slap a god bumper sticker on it, it makes whatever they do okay and acceptable. And like, oh wait, I have something to tell you about how bad I feel. Don't you want to hear all about it? No, fuck off with all that. Nobody wants to hear all about it. But I'm also pissed at June for bringing her there. And it kind of goes back to um what we were talking about earlier, how like being victims being allowed to process things in their own way, in their own time, and how, yes, sometimes when you're in a therapy setting, you do need a push. But this just felt like such a violation of Emily's process to me. Like, she didn't choose this. And I don't know. I just don't like how June took this upon herself, and that's the issue that I have with it. I understand why she did it. I know that June very much feels like this is what worked for me and we're going to give it a try for Emily. It just bothered me.
I agree. I mean, I definitely was bothered by it and all the reasons that you're saying. I guess the only reason I, on the rewatch, feel less bothered by it is because it seems to be what Emily needed. But just because she needed it doesn't mean that it was June's place to decide that for her. Mm-hmm. So I see the issue, but that's where I'm at with it. Like, I see both sides. I don't really know how I feel other than it wasn't June's place, but I'm still just continually frustrated by the rest of the people in June's life that are further removed from their traumas and have not really acknowledged that she is not. And like the way that Moira talks, like, yeah, everything that Moira says is 100% accurate.
Yeah.
Of someone who's been out for 4 years. But no one seems to want to acknowledge that June is like bubbling with this rage and this trauma, obviously, but this need for retribution. And they're just expecting this like support group to work, this little circle to work for everybody. And I just feel like that's the biggest thing I'm getting from this whole episode, is that everyone is also trying to put like the people most important to June's life in Canada, Luke and Moira, they're also putting her in their own box of how they expect her to act when she comes back and who they expected her to be. And despite Moira and her having similar shared experiences, it's nowhere near the same thing. Like, Moira's experience in Gilead is not June's, and at this point, 4 years removed, I feel like she's having a hard time even seeing where June's at, to not be able, I don't know, like, I just feel like they both expect, Luke and Moira are expecting things out of June that she can't give them right now.
No, she's not there yet.
Agreed. And that stands to reason, considering Moira and Luke haven't gotten any counseling as to how to handle someone who is a victim of 7 years of abuse, and abuse that they were not privy to. And even though Moira has went through very similar trauma for the first 3.5, 4 years, Moira's had time to process that and work through that. And not to say that she's not respecting June's process, but it's going to be different for each individual person. Totally agree with you guys on this. I have some other thoughts on the scene though. Like, by June bringing in Aunt Irene without asking anyone else first, and then taking a vote on whether or not to let Irene stay, I couldn't help but see the similarity between what Una did after Moira snuck June onto the vote, and they took a vote, and everything kind of turned into fisticuffs, and eventually June was like watching these people make a decision about her and what should happen with her in front of everyone else, and she had to speak up finally and be like, just let me go, and make the decision. And I faulted Una for this, and I faulted Una for putting it to a vote. The same way that I'm going to fault June for putting it to a vote.
Yes.
What that does is it creates a fissure in the group, and this group is already very tenuous at best, because you're dealing with survivors of Gilead that are working through their trauma in some way or another, like being led by another survivor of Gilead who has training, no doubt, in this, but is not a licensed clinician and is not like a licensed therapist, a licensed psychologist, any of these things. She's just another survivor trying to help other people work through this. So you have June doing the same exact fucking thing as Una, bringing an Marjorie disagrees, putting it to a vote, and then this and I was so mad at her for this until she turned to Emily and said, "Ultimately, the choice is yours, though. What do you want to do?"
That's the difference for me, is that it's two different situations. So yeah, they both took a vote, but my issue with June taking the vote is that it wasn't their vote to decide. Whereas with Una, it's debatable. Like, I understand it was June's life at stake, but also everyone else had stakes in terms of what the repercussions were going to be. In this group, it doesn't really matter what the rest of those people feel is okay for Emily. That's my issue with June taking it to a vote. I'm all for taking it to a vote, and I'm all for people getting heated out into heated arguments within a group to decide something, because that's democracy. That's what should happen. Like, I never want it. Like, I'm always gonna be for everyone should talk about it, even if it gets heated. Like, it's better than one person deciding. So I am always team take a vote, and I don't have an issue with June in general taking votes. It's why I don't have an issue with Una. I very much have an issue with June taking a vote on this, because much like my issue with democracy and voting is, I don't like it when we have to vote on human rights. It shouldn't be up for vote. It shouldn't be up for vote that Emily, the group shouldn't get to decide what Emily gets to decide, but June in the end said it is up to you. So.
Which is why, I invoked the same anger response from me initially with, why are you trying to put this fissure in this group? Why are you trying to divide this group and make a decision for someone else and someone else's path when that person's right here? And all I'm trying to do here is say that it evoked the exact same emotion until June made that differentiation of looking at Emily and saying, it doesn't matter. What do you want?
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
I like that it mirrored it.
To me, it's not even just about what Emily wants in this situation. She took an aunt who is the perpetrator of their abuse and brought her into a circle of women who have been victims of an aunt in one way or another in their past. They're all there because they were victimized, and one of the people that victimized them was a fucking aunt. So I feel like the vote doesn't even matter, because as far as I'm concerned, June walking in with her took the decision away from all of them anyway. We didn't even have to go to a vote. The decision was made because I feel like it was reckless. She didn't know how the other women were going to react to this. I am sure that she had a great read on what it would do for Emily. She knows Emily best out of these women aside from Moira, so I understand why she thought it might be the right thing for Emily. But what about all the other women in the group? And the only reason that June is vindicated here is because she does do that vote, and because all of the, most of these women raise their hands. Didn't all of them raise their hands about whether or not to keep her? I don't remember.
It looked like a big group of them.
Okay.
I don't know if
so,
it was all
it was
of
a
them,
surprising
lot.
number of hands to me. I just don't know if it was all of them. So it's just for her to take this upon herself. That is totally the issue that I have with this. She took the decision away from all of them at that point, not just Emily.
Marching her in, it was never a question first. When you just show up with her, you're right. The vote doesn't matter one way or the other, because she's already there. The damage has been done.
Yeah, that's a good point. By doing so, she's effectively cornering Emily into the decision, whether one way or the other.
Yeah.
Really
peer pressure.
Too late. She's already there. The damage, she could, even if Emily says no, the repercussions have already happened.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good point.
Hey, I think the music here is the same as when she and Luke first had sex again in the hotel room.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Weird. I didn't notice that.
I'm pretty sure. It felt super familiar. It was that meandering, yet somehow insistent piano music. I swear to God, it was the same thing. I could be wrong, but that's immediately what I thought of when I started hearing that.
Yeah, I believe you. I didn't notice.
Yeah, could be like a reprieve. Cool.
Oh God, what if this whole thing initiated a Canadian particular? Could you imagine? She brings her in and all these other handmaids are like, she's an aunt? And then they rip her apart in the library.
I feel like it kind of was going there. It was kind of a Canadian particular for these refugees because, and that's the part where I'm like, I struggle because I definitely agree. Like, it should be up to each person to decide how and when they would like to deal with whatever trauma they're dealing with. And it certainly isn't up to Janoon. Damn, Janine's supposed to be dead here. What the hell?
Janeen's back.
She's just like that. One scene, we see her and Janoon is back. June definitely is taking away everyone else's rights and all those things, but I struggle with the fact that I feel like they do need this, and I feel like they need different help than they're getting, I guess is what I'm saying. And I don't know if they need this. I'm not saying they need a particular, but we've talked about why just when they've been in it for X amount of years, and this is a coping mechanism that they've used to survive. I'm not saying this is what they should be doing, but I feel like they need a better outlet. The way that Larry's giving Lydia outlet because he knows she needs some sort of outlet, it's the same reason that they have the particular. And I feel like June coming back and being like, journaling isn't enough of an outlet for me or for anyone else in this group. And you're out of touch, Moira, by saying that, because Moira's 4 years out of touch. She's healing and she wants everyone else to heal. And that's great, but she's not acknowledging that June is not there yet, and it's just it just comes off like these platitudes, and I think that that's what's really irking June into this this brash behavior, because I do agree that it just wasn't thought through at all. And we've seen June not think things through, and obviously this situation's very tenuous, and I think she's just operating on what she does, survival.
She's still operating like she's in Gilead.
Yeah, she's still operating like she's under extreme duress because for so long she has. You can't just turn that off once you step off a boat.
When they finally get the agreement that Aunt can come in here and crash their support group, and June ushers her chair right to the middle, which is a chair that is straight up handmade and Aunt colors.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really cool. And I think the brown Aunt color was the arms of the chair, right? And then the handmade color was the body.
No, it was like kind of weird because I didn't really pick up on the fact that it was Aunt. I only picked up on the red part. And the red part, if you sit in it, where all the women were sitting in at least the red ones, they weren't all red. But the ones that were red it almost turned into like a red cloak once you sat in it. The back was brown, but you cover the back when you sit. And so it was like the arms and then like the seat. And so it just looked like they were wrapped in red, like a little red cloak.
All right. So it was reversed. I couldn't remember.
I think there was blue ones too, but maybe I'm wrong.
There were blue ones? Oh, yeah,
I think there was blue ones in the circle, that were not being sat in, but it could have just been a weird lighting thing. I'm not positive.
Yeah.
Because the lighting's hard on these screeners.
Speaking of lighting, we see the return of the 4 lights that we hypothesized were meant to represent handmaids' bonnets. We also see the return of the empty seats.
Mm-hmm.
So even during this this interrogation of sorts, our long lost handmaids are still present.
Yeah, June kind of cracks me up here because once she gets the aunt in the center, she like looks around like, isn't this great, guys? And like, I don't know if anybody thinks that this is great. Nobody really knows what to do here, June, except you. But, go on. And she tells her, you wanted to talk. Go ahead. It's okay. She says it's so sweet. Like, we're welcoming. We're inviting here. Say everything that you need to. It's fine. Promise. Wink, wink. And the aunt, she reminds me of Serena in this. She's trying to explain what she did. I've done terrible things. Every aunt has. We're trained to deliver corrections. No, don't sugarcoat it. It's beatings and torture. She can't correct herself with beatings and torture. She has to correct herself with physical punishment, which she says was meant to keep them alive. So yeah, beatings and torture. but she can't bring herself to say it.
Mhm.
And as we go through this, this conversation, and we find out why there is this great animosity and fear and trepidation between her and Emily, again, she just really, I feel like she kind of like, I don't know, sugarcoats isn't the word, but it's like she kind of like just holds herself back a little bit from saying just how terrible it was. Like, she can say the I'm sorry, and she can even eventually get on her knees in front of Emily and ask for forgiveness, but she doesn't ever come out and say, like, yes, I did this. I'm accountable for this. I did these things to you.
Right.
All the aunts did these things to you. I feel like she holds it at an arm's length, just like Serena does,
Mm-hmm.
because she, another one that she justifies everything that she does with God.
Yeah. With God or with someone else made her, or this was the Lydia version of I was doing it to keep you safe. Probably saying came straight from Lydia, founding aunt,
So she was keeping Emily super safe by ratting her out, and which resulted in getting her lover hung and Emily mutilated. Fucking great job, Auntie Iris, or Aunt Irene.
You know what my biggest issue with what she said, like out of all the things that she said, when she gets to the part where she says she couldn't get a moment's sleep once she realized Emily was here. So her physical presence then brought up all that guilt, but before that you were A-okay with your actions. Like, you didn't never lose any sleep when she was still in Gilead, but the second she showed up in Canada, this weighed on you. Like, I don't know, that really bothered me.
Likewise, 100%. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because when she said that she hasn't had a moment's peace since she found out that Emily was in Canada, it's like, but you should have not had a moment's peace from the moment that you found out that you were responsible for the death of a Martha and for the mutilation of a woman, simply because they were trying to find some sort of solace in this crazy world that you were part of. And this is like, I really appreciate June for being no holds barred and holding that mirror to Irene's face. Like, why the fuck do you think you deserve forgiveness?
Uh-huh. Indeed.
And Irene tries with Iris tries with the platitude of like, oh, we're just doing what like God said to, or like instructed us. And again, June holds the mirror to her face and just says, bullshit. You people hide behind God whenever it serves you. And I fucking love that. It's like, because Irene/Iris isn't accountable for herself. She's not really truly remorseful. She's only remorseful because, like, it almost seems as though, because with the proximity to Emily, there's the potential for there's the potential for her guilt being thrown into her face, and that's what makes her feel guilty. But without a personification to the measures that she has gone to, she's totally fine sweeping it underneath the fucking rug. She doesn't deserve forgiveness. If she had felt guilty from the get-go and said, when I found out that you were in Canada, I knew I wouldn't have a moment's peace until I had the opportunity to tell you how sorry I truly am, that would be a totally different framing. But just, once I found out you were in Canada, I haven't had a moment's peace.
Yeah, because I need you to forgive me. And
yeah.
That's at the end of it. It's not even so I can apologize to you. It's so that you can forgive me. It's all about her.
It's kind of, so I think it's interesting because this lady creeps me out. How the fuck did she know that Emily was in Canada? And so that makes me wonder that obviously there is this refugee community that is in Canada and thriving, and to as much as they can be. And so that means that she must be within this, like, or at least on the periphery of the refugee community. And she knows of Emily, and yet she's been around to figure out that Emily goes to this place, let's say every Wednesday night, so she can have her support group. So she managed to stalk Emily enough to figure out that this is a place where she is, and stay out of sight enough that Emily wasn't aware that she was around. I just can't imagine this lady flitting in and out of like refugee services and all the other things that we see these other survivors like taking part in, without her crossing paths with Emily. So it's just creepy. I'm like, you stalked her. How did you find out? So I just wonder, how did you find out? And then I'm just pissed that she basically stalked her to figure out where to find her. I don't know. I was wondering about this. Like, is forgiveness overrated? Like, what is forgiveness? Like when you're talking about abuse, like I've personally found June's method of healing pretty fucking great. Like, I mean, the part where you confront those who have hurt you and you verbally berate them until they crumble into dust in front of you, it's fucking freeing as all hell. However, not a method for everybody. Like, you can't move on without doing some form of whatever forgiveness looks like for you. It doesn't have to be a venomous diatribe towards your tormentor. Forgiveness is going to look different for a lot of people. And I found an interesting quote from Irvin Staub and Lori Ann Perlman. Forgiving is difficult. The very idea of it can be offensive after horrible events like the Holocaust, the genocide in Rwanda, or the genocidal violence in Tibet. Even to people outside the victim group, the idea that survivors should forgive following genocide is an affront, an anathema. It is inconceivable to them and incomprehensible how victims or anyone else would or should forgive the perpetrators. Nonetheless, forgiving is necessary and desirable. It paves the way for reconciliation and furthers healing, thereby making a better future possible. I don't think June's going to be in that camp.
No.
I don't get that feeling.
I'm in that camp with June then, because I get it.
Well, I think people think that forgiveness comes along with a forgetting of what the transgressions were. And that's not what forgiveness is. It's a way for like you personally to find a way to move on so the bitterness of your experience doesn't consume you and make you non-functional, which I believe that is 100%. Where June is 100%.
Yeah. And she'll find her own way to get past that too. In the long run, like, again, I just feel like she's so fresh and off of this trauma, and she's got Serena in a jail, so of course she's going to take that option. A lot of these people wouldn't have been able to do that even if it was what they needed and wanted. But I was thinking you meant like forgiveness specifically in this context of
in any context.
Emily,
what does forgiveness look
no. So I was thinking you were saying like Emily needs to forgive Irene in order to heal and lose that bitterness. And to me, I'm like, no, I'm not. She doesn't owe her anything, period. So yeah, I guess what is forgiveness then? Because for me, what you're describing isn't necessarily what I would say is forgiveness as much as Emily's own way of coping and healing and moving on, which is obviously important, and obviously you need to shed that bitterness. And if you need to scream in your tormentor's face in the process, then I'm like okay with that.
Yeah, if that's what makes you feel better and able to like release and let go. It's not necessarily like I accept your apology and now I can move on because goddamn, I feel so much better.
No.
It's whatever you need to do to find that like release so that it no longer takes over your life.
Yeah, I think it's more of an acceptance that it happened. I accept that this has happened to me and now I can move on. Not that I accept that you have done this to me, because I can't accept that you have perpetrated anything against me, but I can accept that it was done and I do have to move past that.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is. And forgiveness is a way of healing, not necessarily for the perpetrator, but for the person who was on the receiving end of the action. And I very much agree with that sentiment. I don't know if we want to keep this, but I'm going to go off on a tangent. For me, one of the examples that hits pretty close to home as far as forgiveness being a method for healing is, I don't know if you all remember this, but about 10 years ago, this actually hit national news. There was a triple homicide in Connecticut of a doctor's wife and his two daughters. So for those of you that are not familiar with the Pettit case, I would recommend looking it up. It's very compelling.
It's an HBO documentary.
Yeah.
Great documentary.
Amazing documentary and very, very accurate. So there was a doctor who was the victim, or he and his family were the victim of a home invasion. His wife and his two daughters were killed after all three being brutally raped and sodomized. The house burnt down. The only reason that the doctor escaped was because the two perpetrators didn't do a good job beating him to death and tying him in the basement and leaving him to die. That was my parents' primary care physician. So I've had the chance to talk with Dr. Pettit personally about this, and he's come out on record saying that he's like, he could be bitter for the rest of his life, he could be angry, he could harbinger that resentment, but ultimately that's not going to bring his wife back, it's not going to bring his daughters back, and it's not going to change what happened. So does he forgive so in his own way he has forgiven the two perpetrators, not because he forgives them for what they did, but he's forgiving them so that way he can move past those events and start his own healing. It's basically not like a mea culpa for them, like, oops, you fucked up, but it's okay. It's a matter of him allowing himself to process that this is something that happened, but it is part of his past, and it is something that he is going to have to work through to be able to move beyond.
I've seen some interviews with him, and it always jumps out at me. I mean, it's a local case, so obviously, I remember it. But also, that movie I was talking about, Law Abiding Citizens, it's very similar. That's a very fictional version of what happened in the first scene, but then the rest of the movie, it's a totally different path. Every time I hear this man speak, I'm like, my God, it's like Law-Abiding Citizens if it was healthy and coping in the right way with this trauma, versus the way that is so vindicating to me that I like to watch in that movie, where he just kills a bunch of people in the process of getting back at the justice system that freed these murderers. But yeah, but I've always been impressed with his the healthy way in which he has taken that trauma and been able to continue to live with it every day, because I can't imagine.
Yeah, and that's not to say that that is the only path for healing, but that for me is the most tangible example, because I have a first person connection to it, of allowing forgiveness to be a healing mechanism for oneself and allowing oneself to move past their trauma. But I don't think that that's gonna work for June. So it comes down to each individual person and their individual trauma and how they process it, I think, ultimately.
Exactly. And Emily, what does forgiveness look like for her? How do you move past that resentment and hatred for the person who helped initiate you getting your body parts cut off, and the person that you loved murdered? That's a really, really tall order. And this woman knows what she did to Emily, and she desperately wants that "I forgive you. What can I do?" And Emily's like, there's nothing that you can do. And that was actually the best possible answer that she could give this woman, because it doesn't give her that absolution that she's looking for. Because she's right. No matter what, the damage is done. I'm gonna fucking hate you for it. And I feel okay about that. I feel like that's Emily's take on this. She doesn't say as much, but when she puts it very simply, that you can't do anything. Now live with it. That's your cross to bear, not hers.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so appreciated that Emily gets up and we see Irene/Iris just crumble. And we see this gorgeous aerial shot. And you see the 4 bonnet-like lights putting Irene in that same box, which I'm sure Marjorie was going to bring up. Now go to 10. No,
that's it. That's just okay. That Gilead, she's in her own Gilead trauma, but Emma, it's not to Emily to release her. She doesn't, not that she doesn't deserve it, but it's not Emily's call to get her out of her own box.
Absolutely. I also noticed how you have, aside from those four Handmaid's Tale bonnet-esque lights, you had on the left of the screen two empty chairs right behind Irene, the chair that she was sitting on, and then Emily's empty chair. And I couldn't help but notice the fact that those empty chairs made a shape that looked similar to like the female reproductive system.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh.
Putting Irene right smack dab in the middle of it, like right around like the vaginal area. And it seemed so appropriate to me that like she would be stuck in this visual of these empty chairs in this handmaid tribunal, effectively like stuck in the middle of a dead uterus because of what she's done.
Oh, that's awesome. God, you guys are so observant. Not so good with some of the visual things. I'm really not. I pick up on the wordy things and the history things, but the visual stuff, I'm just like, ooh, shiny thing.
That's why we work.